'96?
Well, it wasn't like it is now with all the focus on the NFL, but it was, to me, it was just as important because, here's the thing about it is everyone tells you that you're going to be drafting in the NFL, and you see it every year. Some kids, they're telling every kid he's going to be a first-round draft pick, and they're still sitting there. So nothing's etched in stone. You don't know until you get the phone call. I was back in Norman, and they didn't invite 32 picks to New York City. They didn't have social media. They didn't have a lot of things, and so it wasn't sensationalized. It was a big deal. Don't get me wrong, but I ended up just staying in Norman with the family and friends, and so Bo Jackson was the first player picked, in which I knew that Tampa Bay was going to draft him, and so he ended up playing baseball, but. I got the call, and I couldn't believe it. It was just one of those surreal moments where you got the opportunity to not only play in the NFL, but to be the second player picked in the draft, and I just couldn't believe it. If someone had told me growing up that I'd had the chance to play in the NFL, I would have said, you know what, that's every kid's dream. But to be the number 2 pick, it was just overwhelming, and that's the great thing about the draft. It never changes that. Because every kid has that desire and dream to play in the NFL, and so few get an opportunity to play in it.
Yeah, and you get to your first training camp. What were some of the differences between the NFL, NCAA football, and also was there anybody that kind of took you under their wing to help you out?
Well, I was lucky because I went to Atlanta, and during that time frame, it was the doormat of the NFL. You had, I believe the Falcons are 4-12. I mean, there's a reason why if you're drafted high in the first round, that team's not going to be very good. That's the bad part of it. But I remember Rick Bryan was there, and then Scott Case were there, so there was some familiarity there. But you know what? No one can really tell you how to handle the NFL, and certainly it's changed a lot. But there's a lot of pressure on you, and I always put a lot of pressure. I had a lot of anxiety going into camp, and how I was going to play, and I held out, and how I was going to make the transition. And again, when I alluded to about the changing the college, from high school, it's all about the speed of the game. But I just remember the first guy I lined up against was an All-Pro and a Hall of Famer now, Dwight Stevenson, and I held out, and I was in training camp, and we go through one-on-one drills, and he throws me down 3 times in a row, and I'm thinking, is this what every player's like? And so he baptized me and just knocked me on my ass a few times, and I got back up. And I think the thing that really told me that really helped me is that he told me, he said, hey, rookie, Rome wasn't built in one day. And I'm like, well, hopefully it'll be built in the next month because I do not like this transition. Yeah. But that's one thing about the NFL. These guys they've seen it. They've been there. They've been there, done that. They see everything. You take a player that's been in the league for 6 or 7 years. He's gone through all the learning curve that you've gone through, all the aches and pains, bumps and bruises that you transition, and they've seen it all. And then, unless you're just one of these athletically gifted guys, and it's difficult. But again, I think the transition of having some familiarity with some guys that played at Oklahoma, and just, it's hard for me because we lost, I believe we lost 26 games in the first 3 years. And I'm like, when I was at Oklahoma, we won in Atlanta. We won as many games as I lost during my career there, and that was very that really humbling, and really brought me to a place where this is not really what I thought the NFL was about. Yeah, the money's good, but look, after a while, it's like any job. You're like, why am I just doing this for the money? And I guess I went against that. Wasn't the conventional way of handling things, because I thought, well, there's got to be an environment where it's positive and not everything's about, well, at least I'm getting a paycheck. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to overcome, and ultimately that's probably what got me out of Atlanta.
Well, see, you just killed my next question, too, because I was going to ask you if it had to be tough.
That's exactly right.
But so you get to trade to Dallas. Jimmy Johnson was the coach there. You got there right as he was turning things around. What was it like being in Dallas as compared to Atlanta, and what was Jimmy Johnson like to play for?
Well, the way I'd equate it to is I hated training camp. I'm not gonna lie about that. But who likes training camp? But I remember when I told Jerry Glanville, I told them, I said, you know what, I'm going to retire because I didn't fit in. I had 5 coaches in 5 years, and I just felt like I needed a change. I didn't know if that was going to happen, but it sure turned out that way. And so I remembered when I was finally traded to Dallas. It was just like a burden was lifted off me, and so I ended up flying into Austin, and you got to remember, training camp was brutal. I mean, it's 105 degrees in the shade there.
Yeah, and actually hit back then in training camp.
Oh shit, it was old school. I mean, we're talking about just 2-a-days, and we're talking 2-hour practices, and it was just a different mentality, different era. And I remember getting off the plane, and I had the biggest smile on my face. Not only the fact that I was coming to Dallas, and I grew up watching fall in Dallas, but you know, I got to admit I wasn't the biggest fan, but just to go to an environment where that star meant something, that the circus was always in town, regardless of what the record was. There was a lot that went with the star, and then he had Jimmy Johnson, and I remember him calling me and said, "Hey, we're going to trade for you," and then Dave Wannstedt was the defensive coordinator. He recruited me out of high school, and he was at Oklahoma State. Collectively, had all these coaches were on staff, and so I just like, man, this is great. I mean, give me some energy. And I'm thinking, I'm not even having anxiety about going to training camp. I want to practice, because I just felt like that there was this amount of energy. I got the passion back to play football, and regardless of what our record was going to be, that reignited my career, and I just felt like it was in a more positive environment.
Yeah, and you guys make the playoffs immediately, which you never did in Atlanta. I think you guys ended up losing to Detroit. Then you get to the 92 season. You want to talk a little bit about what made that team great? I mean, you had the triplets, you had Irvin, you had Aikman, you had Emmitt Smith. What was it like to play with those guys? You had guys like Ken Norton on defense. I mean, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the playoffs, I didn't know. That was a foregone conclusion. I what's playoffs? And like the Jim Moore, after the people want to talk about playoffs, I didn't know how to spell that. And it just wasn't part of my vocabulary because I was in Atlanta for 5 years, and we were always on a trip or playing golf somewhere when the playoffs came around. But I think Barry Sanders was the one that really kind of motivated us, because when we beat Chicago and then we got beat by them in Detroit, I mean, he made us look silly. They ran all over us that day, and I think we learned a lot about that. We were close, but we just weren't there quite. And our defense got better the next year. Obviously, our offense got another year under the belt. Everyone started maturing. Offensive line became better. So I think we learned a lot from that, because there was a lot of games that you got to win during the playoffs, during the regular season, that we didn't close out. So that game really resonated with us, and it started in the off season. It started when we were in training camp, and Jimmy, God bless him, Jimmy was the greatest coach, but he did not like losing. I mean, he was his brain and his emotion is so wrapped up into whatever agenda it was. His agenda was our agenda. Our agenda was his agenda, because that's what it represented. And he made it so uncomfortable for us to lose and for us to not win. And I just remember this is in 92 when we went to the Super Bowl. During the preseason, and this was during training camp. We had a preseason game, and our special teams was atrocious. I mean, it was horrible. So the next day, we go back to Austin training camp. And he tells everybody up, and he goes, "I'm so upset. You know, the way you guys played on special teams. Not only are the special team players going to do rep after rep, the whole team is going to be on running special teams. So I swear to God, I think the only person that wasn't running down on kickoff and kickoff return was Trey. Everyone else was running down the field. Across the board, it didn't matter. Everyone was out there running kickoff teams. You're bad in kickoff team, all right. Offensive line, defensive line, defense, offense, everyone's running. Emmitt Smith, whoever. And we did that. And we did that for, it seemed like for an hour. And guess what? We were better in the special teams because that was the way Jimmy ran his team. And so I think that was things like that because we felt so uncomfortable about losing. And everyone was kind of, whether you're a franchise player, I think there was always this insecurity that you weren't doing a good enough job. There wasn't this complacency that some guys had. It's like Jimmy was right there, and he's watching you. And I think that's what really kind of really resonated deep inside in everyone's soul that was Jimmy's footprint, and his thumb was on everything that we needed to accomplish to be a championship football team.
Now, 92, I'd say the signature game for that team probably would be the 92 championship game at San Francisco. You want to talk a little bit about that game?
That was probably the biggest moment that I've ever had in my football life. Besides having my kids and being married to my beautiful wife. She's exercising right now. I don't think she's doing it. No.
Yeah, you got to make sure you bring that up just in case she hears it, though. I know how that is.
No, I think that in my football life and just being able to just that go-to moment that you have in your life, that it doesn't matter how old you are, how gray you are, how fat you are, it doesn't matter. It was that moment that you go back in time and you think about, well, this is what it's about. Because you got to remember, if you go back in 92, no one gave us a chance. We were the heavy underdog, and we went out to San Francisco playing against a team like Steve Young, Jerry Rice, and all this great historical franchise, and go on the road and have to do what we did was unbelievable because I think we were just mature enough to handle it. We were probably almost like the kid that didn't know any better, but we were really good. And again, it came down to being well coached, pay attention to detail, not making mistakes. And I remember they turned the ball over a few times. We got some big plays in that game, went back and forth. Emmitt had a great day, the offensive line. Steve Young did what he needed to do, but we were able to make the big plays and get interceptions. And I think we shocked the world. I don't think anyone in that building thought that we'd go in there and beat them like we did. And then, of course, after the game's over, you're sitting around, you're sitting there looking at each other. You know what? Or you're like, did we just win the NFC Championship game? Are we actually going to the Super Bowl? And you're like, it's like almost like someone has to, how corny it says, someone has to pinch you, or I don't want the dream to end because I want this to be true. And to me, that was like the biggest moment to look around a bunch of guys. And I was only there for 2 years, and for my own, I guess, selfish reasons, like everyone else, is like, you know what, this is what football's all about. And to be able to go to the Super Bowl and have the opportunity and win on the road under all these heavy odds that weren't going to get there, it was just, to me, it just seemed like an impossible dream.
All right, now, was it anticlimactic, the Super Bowl? Was it hard to get up for that game after the San Francisco game?
Oh, no. Here's the thing about the Super Bowl, what I've learned, and I think the Buffalo Bills will tell you that, to get there and not be able to win the football game, because there's a reason that they give Super Bowl rings out to people. One, they're very hard to win, and two, you never know when you're going to get there. And I know for Buffalo, I can only just imagine what they've gone.